Have you ever wondered why, the more kindness you show, the more some people seem to take advantage of you? Why the person who always helps, always forgives, always gives more than they receive, somehow ends up feeling drained, disrespected, and invisible? It feels unfair, because we grow up believing kindness should bring respect. That being good to people will make them good to us. But here is the uncomfortable truth most people never talk about. Sometimes your kindness doesn't inspire respect. Sometimes it invites exploitation. Because in the hidden psychology of human behavior, kindness without boundaries can quietly signal something else: weakness. And if you don't understand this dynamic, your generosity can become the very tool people use against you. Let's explore the deeper psychological reasons why your kindness might be working against you, and how to reclaim its true power. The first reason your kindness gets used against you is the absence of boundaries. Kindness and boundaries must exist together, like two sides of the same coin. When one disappears, the other loses its meaning. Without boundaries, kindness slowly stops being a virtue and begins to look like permission. Permission for others to take more, expect more, and eventually demand more than you ever intended to give. Many people grow up believing that being a good person means always saying yes. Yes to helping. Yes to sacrificing. Yes to fixing problems that were never theirs to begin with. They learn to measure their worth by how useful they are to others. But the human psyche does not always respond to kindness in the way we imagine. Consider someone at work who always says yes. They stay late after everyone else has gone home. They help coworkers complete their projects. They take on responsibilities that were never part of their role. If someone forgets a deadline, they step in to save the situation. If the team is overwhelmed, they volunteer first. At the beginning, people appreciate them. They are praised as dependable, generous, and selfless. Their kindness seems to elevate them in the eyes of others. But over time, something subtle begins to change. The appreciation fades. Instead of gratitude, expectations quietly take its place. Coworkers begin to assume this person will handle extra tasks. Managers start assigning them more work than others. When a difficult problem appears, everyone looks in their direction as if the responsibility naturally belongs to them. And when that person, perhaps for the first time, finally says no, the reaction is rarely gratitude for everything they have already done. Instead, people respond with surprise, sometimes even frustration or anger. How can you say no? You've always helped before. We thought we could count on you. This reaction feels deeply unfair. After everything they have given, after all the sacrifices they have made, suddenly they are treated as if they have done something wrong simply by protecting their own time. Why does this happen? Because human behavior is shaped by patterns. The pattern you create becomes the role people assign to you. Psychologists often describe this process as behavioral conditioning. When people repeatedly receive something without resistance, they gradually stop seeing it as a gift. Their mind begins to interpret it as the natural order of things. Imagine a neighbor who occasionally helps you carry groceries. You appreciate the kindness. But if they do it every single day for months, something shifts in the mind. What once felt like generosity begins to feel expected. The same transformation happens with emotional energy, time, and effort. Your kindness becomes the standard. And once something becomes the standard, it loses the power of being special. The tragedy is that many kind people do not realize this dynamic until they feel exhausted. They believe the problem is that they have not given enough, so they give even more. They try harder to prove their goodness, hoping that one day people will finally appreciate it. But appreciation rarely grows in environments without limits. Without boundaries, kindness slowly erases the space where respect should exist, because boundaries communicate something fundamental about the psyche's self-respect. They quietly tell the world that your time has value, that your energy matters, and that your generosity is a choice, not an obligation. Think about the people in life who are both kind and respected. They are generous, but they are not endlessly available. They help others, but they do not sacrifice their well-being for every request that appears. When they give, it feels meaningful. When they say no, it feels natural. Their kindness carries weight precisely because it is not limitless. In contrast, endless availability creates a dangerous illusion. It signals that your energy is infinite, that your needs are secondary, that your time belongs to anyone who asks for it. And people, often unconsciously, adjust their behavior to match the signals they receive. This is why healthy kindness must always include limits. Limits do not destroy generosity. They protect it. They transform kindness from something that is taken for granted into something that is genuinely valued. True generosity is not endless self-sacrifice. It is conscious giving. It is the ability to help others while still standing firmly within the boundaries of your own dignity. Because the moment kindness begins to erase your own well-being, it stops being kindness altogether. It becomes surrender. The second reason your kindness gets exploited is something far deeper and more unsettling than simple selfishness. It lies within the hidden layers of the human psyche, what psychologists often describe as the shadow. Every human being carries a shadow within them. It is the part of the personality that holds the emotions we do not want to admit, the traits we try to hide, and the impulses we push into the dark corners of our mind. Inside this shadow live insecurities, jealousy, resentment, guilt, and unresolved frustrations. Most people spend their lives pretending this part of themselves does not exist. But the shadow never truly disappears. It simply waits for moments when it can reveal itself. And strangely, one of the most powerful triggers for this hidden side of the psyche is encountering someone who is genuinely kind. When a person who struggles with dishonesty, selfishness, or manipulation meets someone who behaves with sincerity and generosity, something uncomfortable happens within them. Your behavior becomes a silent comparison. Without saying a word, your kindness reflects a possibility they may have ignored within themselves. And the mind does not always react well to uncomfortable reflections. Instead of appreciating kindness, some people subconsciously begin to test it. They push boundaries. They take more than they give. They criticize the person who helps them. They dismiss the generosity they receive as if it means nothing. At first glance, this behavior seems confusing and irrational. Why would someone disrespect the very person who treats them well? The answer lies in the tension created by the shadow. Kindness can expose the parts of ourselves we would rather keep hidden. When someone treats us with honesty, patience, and empathy, it highlights the moments when we failed to do the same for others. It forces us, often unconsciously, to confront traits we prefer not to see. And the human mind has a powerful defense mechanism against uncomfortable truths: projection. Projection is the psychological process where people take the parts of themselves they cannot accept and place them onto someone else. Instead of acknowledging their own flaws, they begin to criticize or attack the person who reflects those flaws back at them. This is why kindness sometimes attracts hostility instead of appreciation. Your behavior becomes a mirror, and many people do not like what they see in mirrors. Imagine a person who constantly lies to gain advantages in life. Manipulation has become normal to them. It is simply the way they navigate the world. Now imagine they meet someone who is honest, generous, and sincere. The contrast creates tension within their mind. Your authenticity challenges the narrative they have built about how people behave. It suggests that another way of living is possible, a way that requires confronting their own dishonesty. And rather than face that uncomfortable realization, the mind often chooses an easier path. It attacks the mirror. They may begin to mock your kindness. They might say you are naive, weak, or unrealistic. They might exploit your generosity to prove to themselves that your values are foolish. But this reaction says far more about their inner conflict than it does about your character. Because deep down, your kindness has disturbed something within them. There are countless examples of this dynamic in everyday life. A generous colleague may be labeled as trying too hard. A compassionate friend may be accused of being fake. A person who refuses to gossip might suddenly become the target of gossip themselves. These reactions are not always conscious acts of cruelty. Often they are psychological defenses. When someone feels exposed by another person's integrity, they sometimes try to pull that person down to a level where they feel more comfortable. If kindness is mocked, it becomes easier to justify selfishness. If honesty is criticized, dishonesty feels less shameful. In this way, attacking kindness becomes a way of protecting the shadow. But understanding this dynamic changes how you interpret these experiences. When someone disrespects your generosity or takes advantage of your patience, it does not necessarily mean your kindness is weak. Sometimes it means your kindness is confronting something powerful within them. It is illuminating parts of their character they have not yet faced. And many people react to light the same way someone reacts to a bright lamp in a dark room. They look away, or they try to switch it off. This is why you must never allow the reactions of others to convince you that kindness is a mistake. What you are witnessing is not proof that kindness lacks strength. It is evidence that kindness has the power to reveal truth, and truth, for those who are not ready to face themselves, can feel deeply threatening. So they criticize it, they exploit it, they try to diminish it, not because kindness is weak, but because it makes them uncomfortable. The third reason your kindness gets used against you lies in a quiet but powerful pattern within human psychology. People naturally value what is scarce. What is limited appears important. What is rare feels precious. And what is endlessly available often becomes invisible. This principle appears everywhere in human life. Limited opportunities feel exciting. Rare experiences feel meaningful. Even a simple object can feel more valuable when it is difficult to obtain. But when something is always available, always accessible, always present without effort, the mind slowly begins to treat it as ordinary. The same rule quietly shapes how people respond to your time, your energy, and your kindness. There is a powerful psychological principle studied in behavioral economics known as the scarcity effect. Researchers have repeatedly observed that people assign greater value to things they believe are limited. Scarcity creates attention. It signals importance. It tells the mind that something must be protected and respected. But unlimited availability sends the opposite message. When something appears endless, the mind unconsciously assumes it will always be there. This is where many kind people unknowingly lose their power. If someone can call you at any moment, ask you for help at any time, and receive your energy without effort, something subtle begins to happen. Your kindness becomes predictable, and when kindness becomes predictable, it slowly loses the emotional weight it once carried. Not because kindness is worthless, but because the human mind adapts to what it receives repeatedly. Think about the friend who only contacts you when they need something. Perhaps they ask for advice, help with a task, emotional support, or even financial assistance. The first few times you help, they may thank you sincerely. They may appreciate the effort you made to support them. But if the pattern continues and you always respond immediately, always solve their problem, always sacrifice your time without hesitation, they begin to learn something. Not necessarily that you are kind, but that you are always available. And availability, when it becomes unlimited, stops feeling like generosity. It starts to feel like a permanent resource they can access whenever they wish. The strange irony of human nature is that people often respect what they must wait for more than what they receive instantly. Imagine two people offering help. One person gives their time occasionally, thoughtfully, and with clear limits. The other person is always available, always ready, always saying yes no matter the circumstances. Over time, which person do you think will be respected more? Often it is the one whose help is less frequent but more intentional, because scarcity creates meaning. When something is not guaranteed, people notice it, they value it, they remember it. But when something is guaranteed, the mind stops registering it as special. Many people who are deeply kind fall into a silent trap. They believe that constant availability proves their loyalty and care for others. They fear that setting limits will make them appear selfish or distant. So they answer every call. They solve every problem. They carry responsibilities that were never theirs. Yet the result is often the opposite of what they hoped for. Instead of appreciation growing, it fades. Instead of respect increasing, it weakens. Because the moment your kindness becomes automatic, it stops being seen as a conscious gift. It becomes routine, and routine rarely inspires gratitude. This does not mean the solution is to become cold, distant, or emotionally unavailable. Kindness should never transform into indifference. The goal is not to withdraw from people or to harden your heart against others. The goal is awareness. Kindness must be intentional, not automatic. When you choose when to give your time, when to offer your help, and when to step back, your kindness regains its meaning. It becomes a conscious act rather than a reflex. People begin to feel its presence again. They notice the effort. They recognize the choice behind it. And something interesting begins to happen. When your time is no longer endlessly accessible, others begin to value it more carefully. They think before making requests. They respect your energy because they understand it is not limitless. This is not manipulation. It is simply aligning with a basic truth of human psychology. Respect often grows in the presence of boundaries, and scarcity, when balanced with genuine kindness, protects the very thing that makes generosity powerful. Your kindness should never feel like an endless well others can draw from without thought. It should feel like something meaningful, something intentional, something chosen with care. Because when kindness is chosen rather than assumed, it regains the power to touch people deeply. And when something touches people deeply, it is no longer taken for granted. The fourth reason your kindness gets used against you is something far more subtle than manipulation or selfishness. It is fear, not the loud kind of fear that appears in moments of danger, but the quiet fear that lives inside the human heart, the fear of conflict. Many people who are deeply kind share a hidden trait that few recognize at first. They avoid confrontation. They feel uncomfortable when tension appears in relationships. They worry that expressing disagreement will make them seem rude, selfish, or ungrateful. So they choose the safer path. They stay silent. At first, this silence feels like peace. It feels like maturity. It feels like emotional control. But beneath that silence, something begins to slowly grow inside the psyche. Resentment. Because every time you ignore your own limits to keep others comfortable, you send a message not only to them, but also to yourself. You teach your mind that your needs are less important than avoiding discomfort. You convince yourself that maintaining harmony is more valuable than protecting your well-being. And the mind remembers these decisions. Many kind people believe that by avoiding conflict, they are protecting relationships. They imagine that patience and tolerance will eventually be recognized and appreciated. They believe that if they keep giving, people will eventually notice their sacrifices. But human relationships rarely function that way. When limits are never spoken, they remain invisible. And when limits are invisible, people cannot see where the boundary lies. So they keep stepping forward. Not always out of cruelty or selfish intent, but simply because the line was never drawn. This is why fear of conflict quietly transforms kindness into vulnerability. The person who cannot say no becomes the person others rely on without thinking. The one who never objects becomes the one whose time is assumed to be available. And with every silent compromise, the imbalance grows. Consider a real-life example that many people have experienced in one form or another. Imagine a woman who has a close friend who occasionally asks to borrow money. At first, it seems harmless. The friend promises to repay it soon. The woman agrees, believing that helping a friend in need is the right thing to do. But the money is never returned. Weeks pass, then months. Eventually, the friend asks again. The woman feels uncomfortable. Something inside her senses that the situation is unfair, but she also fears that refusing might damage the friendship, so she gives again. This pattern repeats. Each time the friend promises repayment, and each time the promise fades away, and each time the woman feels a deeper frustration growing within her, she begins to feel used. She begins to feel angry, yet she never expresses these feelings. Instead, she hides them behind a polite smile and another quiet sacrifice. Years pass this way. From the outside, it may appear that the friendship is stable, but beneath the surface, something fragile is slowly breaking. The resentment grows heavier. The emotional weight becomes harder to carry. The woman starts to feel anxious whenever the friend calls. She dreads the conversation she knows is coming. Eventually, the relationship collapses. But it does not collapse because she said no. It collapses because she waited too long to say it. This is one of the painful ironies of human relationships. Avoiding conflict does not eliminate tension. It simply postpones it while allowing it to grow stronger in the shadows. By the time it finally surfaces, the emotions are often too intense to repair what was once simple. Conflict avoided becomes respect lost, not because you intended to lose respect, but because silence created the illusion that everything was acceptable. Others adjusted their behavior according to the signals they received. And the signal they received was that your boundaries were flexible or perhaps non-existent. But healthy relationships require something deeper than constant harmony. They require honesty. They require the courage to speak uncomfortable truths before they transform into resentment. When someone expresses their limits clearly, they do not destroy the relationship, they protect it. They give the other person an opportunity to adjust, to understand, to respect the boundary that was invisible before. Without this honesty, kindness begins to carry a hidden cost. The cost is emotional exhaustion. The cost is suppressed anger. The cost is the quiet feeling that you are slowly disappearing beneath the expectations of others. And this is why kindness must always be balanced with courage. The courage to say no when something feels wrong. The courage to disappoint someone if the alternative is betraying your own well-being. The courage to accept that temporary discomfort is sometimes necessary for long-term respect. Because when kindness is guided by fear, it slowly transforms into silent suffering. But when kindness is guided by honesty, it becomes something far stronger. It becomes respect for others and for yourself. The fifth and most important reason your kindness gets used against you is simple, yet deeply overlooked. You forgot that kindness must include yourself. Many people grow up with a misunderstanding about what kindness truly means. From childhood, they are taught that being good requires sacrifice, that being generous means always giving more than you receive, that patience means tolerating everything, and that forgiveness means allowing the same wound to happen again and again. Over time, this belief shapes their identity. They begin to see kindness as endless sacrifice, endless patience, endless understanding. They become the person who always helps, always supports, always forgives, even when it costs them their peace. But something important is missing from this picture. True kindness cannot exist without self-respect. Kindness that excludes yourself slowly turns into self-neglect. And when a person neglects their own needs long enough, the world begins to follow the same pattern. There is a simple truth about human relationships that many people do not want to face. People tend to follow the standards you set for your own value. If you constantly sacrifice your energy without rest, others begin to assume your energy is limitless. If you ignore your own emotional needs, others begin to believe those needs are unimportant. If you repeatedly tolerate disrespect, people start to believe that disrespect is acceptable. This does not always happen because others are cruel or malicious. Often it happens because human beings adapt to the signals they receive, and the signals we send are often quieter than the words we speak. When you constantly give without replenishing yourself, you send a silent message to the world: my needs come last. At first, you may believe this is noble. You may believe this proves your loyalty, your compassion, your goodness. But the human psyche cannot give endlessly without consequences. You cannot pour from an empty cup. Imagine a candle that is used to light every other candle in the room. At first, the room becomes brighter. Everyone benefits from the flame. But if that candle is never protected, never replenished, never allowed to burn peacefully, eventually its flame begins to weaken. And when it finally goes out, the room becomes darker than before. This is what happens to people who give endlessly without protecting themselves. Their kindness slowly drains their energy, their peace, and sometimes even their sense of identity. Yet if you observe carefully, you will notice something interesting about the people who are both kind and deeply respected. They help others. They listen when someone is struggling. They offer support, empathy, and guidance. But they also protect their energy with quiet confidence. They do not allow manipulation to continue once it becomes clear. They do not tolerate repeated disrespect disguised as friendship. And when necessary, they say no without apology. These individuals are not cold or heartless. In fact, they are often some of the most compassionate people you will ever meet. But their compassion has structure, their kindness has boundaries. And strangely, these people are rarely exploited. Why? Because their kindness is balanced with strength. Strength communicates something powerful to the world. It tells others that your generosity is a choice, not an obligation. It shows that your compassion is genuine, but it is not something that can be demanded or abused. When people sense this balance, their behavior changes. They respect your time. They appreciate your help. They think carefully before crossing your boundaries. Because they understand something important: your kindness is not weakness. History offers powerful examples of this principle. Consider leaders who demonstrated extraordinary compassion, even toward those who opposed them. One of the most powerful examples is Nelson Mandela. After decades of imprisonment, he chose reconciliation instead of revenge. He showed forgiveness where many would have shown hatred, but his compassion did not come from submission. It came from strength. He never abandoned his dignity. He never surrendered his principles. His kindness was powerful precisely because it was supported by unshakable self-respect. This is the balance many people must rediscover within themselves. Kindness does not mean allowing others to take advantage of you. It does not mean ignoring your own limits. And it certainly does not mean sacrificing your well-being to keep everyone else comfortable. Kindness without strength invites exploitation. But kindness with strength creates something entirely different. It inspires respect. It teaches others how to treat you. And most importantly, it protects the very quality that makes kindness so valuable in the first place. Because the world does not need kindness that destroys the person who gives it. The world needs kindness that stands tall, protects its dignity, and still chooses compassion. That kind of kindness does not fade. It transforms lives, including your own. So if your kindness has been used against you, it doesn't mean kindness is the problem. It means the balance between generosity and self-respect was lost. Real kindness is not submission. It is conscious choice. It is helping others while honoring your own limits. It is giving, but not at the cost of your identity. Because the most powerful form of kindness is not the one that sacrifices itself. It is the one that stands strong and still chooses to care.